please, when not speaking, to avoid any background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public that is participating knows exactly who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and is current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. Also, make sure that when you're speaking that you speak clearly into the microphone and at an audible level that can be captured for memorialization by our clerk. I will now call this meeting to order. And clerk, could you announce the meeting and give the roll call?
Good evening. You're hereby notified that a special meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas is scheduled to be conducted in a hybrid format on Thursday, May 16th, 2024 at 5 p.m. for a budget workshop in the fifth floor conference room of the Municipal Office Building, 701 North 7th Street, Kansas City, Kansas. Roll call. Kane, we have an absence memo. Lopez. Stites.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Ramirez, we have an absence memo. Hill.
Here.
Garner.
Here. Thank you, clerk. Tonight, we're continuing our series of budget workshops. This session will be discussing the CIMP process as well as projects related to that. I'll ask our county administrator, Mr. David Johnson, to take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As always, we have in the budget process, early in the budget process, a review of the capital improvement program. And I'm going to now recognize Reggie Lindsay, our budget director, to take the microphone and proceed. Reggie.
Good evening, everyone. What we're here to do today is provide some insight on the 2024 through 2029 capital improvement process. What we plan to do is give an overview of the process and also an overview of some of the projects that we have been looking to get into the budget. So we'll provide an overview on the funding. Our CFO, Shelley Knieven, she will provide an overview on the funding, and then Public Works, Troy Shaw and Greg Wooten, they'll provide an overview on infrastructure and also facilities. And then also Angel Ferrara, she's going to provide an overview of Parks and Recs capital needs. And then we're going to discuss some of the technology needs that we also have within the organization as they relate to projects. So we kind of get started out as far as just kind of re-examining our goals that were kind of set forward by the commission for our 2025 budget. So we have uphold physical sustainability, improve infrastructure, and focus on service and communication, and then foster economic development. So tonight we're going to be focusing in on improving infrastructure, and our CFO, she is going to discuss making sure that we uphold physical sustainability, which is priority number one. And then as we work through the presentation, we'll see that infrastructure also does impacts foster economic development. So here in the unified government, we start our CIP process in February. Departments, they start to look at their needs, and those needs are cross-examined by core groups that we have. We have a technology core group. We also have an infrastructure core group, and then we have a facility core group. These core groups, they look at needs based on rankings in our asset databases, and we prioritize from there based on what we'll try to work into our budget and look at like what funding mechanisms we have to get those needs into our budget. Core groups and budget and finance, we meet quarterly to look at like what's going on with the capital within the organization outside the budget process. But within the budget process, we meet weekly to look at like affordability for core groups and also across the organization. And then we start to prioritize and look at assets in our different asset databases and look at the organization priority. So within Public Works, there's an infrastructure asset database that they utilize. And then they also have a facilities database that they utilize where we can look at the needs of the community from those databases and know what we have in those databases. Once we pull together all the data, we meet with a larger group of departments of capital users to show those capital users what the overall picture is of our capital process and also all the needs that have come in. And we take that information to them to show them that there's a lot of needs within the organization and that we can't afford them all. We show them like what our financial picture looks like. Then we have all the needs that have come in during the capital process to show them and get them to understand that they're going to have to work with other departments to get things into the budget. And we'll have to prioritize and may not be able to get certain things into the budget. And so one of the things that we have found out is that departments, after going through those processes, they definitely do understand that they won't be able to get everything into the budget that they need. And we find that some departments actually come back and say, we can push this off after seeing what the financial picture is and seeing and hearing about what the other needs are for departments. So after we start doing all that and have worked through their process, we start to meet with the county administrator's office, and then we come to this process where we bring information to you as a commission. And then we'll take information to our UG Planning Commission. We meet with them twice within the budget process. One of the things is they have to approve the capital project schedule before our budget is approved. So once we'll take a preliminary look to the UG Planning Commission in July so they can see it. And then after we propose the budget to you all on August the 8th, we'll take another schedule to them so they can see what we're proposing to pass. And then they'll pass that, and then you all will approve the budget if at that point. So there is a ranking process that we go through. As I talked about a little bit earlier, Public Works has a ranking system for streets and bridges and also facilities. So what they have done in those ranking processes is they have inventoried and gathered all the data on all their facilities and all their streets and bridges. And then that data is analyzed. And once it's analyzed from being inventory, we go through and analyze that data to see what projects we're going to be looking at and based on like where the needs are. And so we have where projects are weighed, and those projects are weighed on certain criteria such as the safety and the condition and the population that it services. And then we look at the projects after they run through being inventoried and the data is analyzed and the projects are weighed, the projects are then ranked. And that's where we kind of start to pull the data together and look at it. So we have multiple data points that we examine throughout the process, and we're getting input from a variety of sources, and we score the individual criteria. And then we create budget scenarios based on the needs of the departments. We know we can't fund everything that's needed, so we start to do things like build different budget scenarios, looking at like what the priority would be, and then also looking at what we can afford. So we have the big three outcomes, which consist of streets, bridges, and facilities. And so what we have that fit into here, we have definitely Public Works that fits into this with their facilities and also with their streets and bridges, but also Parks Facilities fits into this, and also some of our roads and bridges within some of our parks that needs to be replaced. So looking at some of the streets, we see that we have a required, we're looking to like pavement preservation to build it up to 65 by 2045. And that requires sustained funding increase of 25%. We know we may not be able to afford 25% each year, but that is a need if we want to get to that PCI condition index by 2045. And then bridges by 2040, if we wanted to improve the sufficiency index there, we do also need 25% additional funding to improve by 2040. And then facilities, would like to look at a strategic plan of removing liabilities from our inventory. And that is something that we're already in the process of doing. As far as like when we opened up Turner Fire Station, we were able to take some facilities off of our inventory. And then we have some stabilization projects going on within City Hall, and then you have a rehabilitation project going on in the courthouse, which will allow us to possibly move other departments into both of those buildings, which would help us get out of some leases in the future. So just wanted to give a overview of how CIP is as far as what the definition of it is. So it's defined as a capital asset and equipment investment and management policy, and the useful life of capital equipment or capital projects is at least 5 years, and the total amount is $50,000. And projects can include construction, reconstruction, and rehabilitation or maintenance of a capital asset. And equipment needs can include replacement and upgrade and purchase of new equipment. And off to the side, we have some pie charts to kind of break down the CIP functional area. And I talked about facilities, core group, and also infrastructure core group. And then our technology core group, which is innovation and productivity. So we can see our infrastructure core group has the most funding, being 66%. And then facilities is the next largest one at 18%. And the total amount of our CIP is $95 million. And then the pie chart below is a breakdown of our projects and equipment. So we see projects is 86% of our capital, and equipment is 14%. Current slide is a breakdown of capital across our different funds. So our different fund categories are special revenue funds, our enterprise funds, and then our other tax levy funds, and our fiduciary funds, and then our consolidated general funds. And Shelley, she's going to drill down into those funds a little bit more. Just kind of wanted to break down that, give you all a view of capital as a total of our budget, so we could see the capital outlay within our special revenue funds are like 36% of the budget. When we get into our consolidated general funds, and that would be like our city and county funds, capital spending is only 2% of that, and the rest of this spending goes to like personnel and operating costs. So the 2024 capital improvement program, this particular slide is breaking down the difference between equipment and projects as far as showing the percentages. And we see we spent a lot more on projects than we do equipment. So we see like in the special revenue funds, we're spending like 90% on projects, and across our general funds, which would be the city and the county, it's almost about half and half, because we do purchase a lot of equipment from our cash funds. But when we get to the enterprise funds, we can see that 90% of the funding goes towards projects. So now I'm going to turn it over to Shelley.
Okay, so in a broad sense, there are a couple of key different funding sources for capital projects. There's the operating funds, which include our general fund, the park fund, health fund, on the street, and highway fund. There's the debt fund, which is for our debt service payments, which is our principal and interest. And it pays for all of our debt. Our enterprise funds, which are paid for by user fees. Our grant funds, which include federal and state. And on occasion, we have private contributions. That's typically going to be over in the Parks and Recreation category. So we have kind of broad bases. These are the ways that we fund all of the projects that we've just kind of talked about. For the city, this is an illustration. It's just a good reference point for you of the different funds that have the ability to pay for capital projects. So you can see that we have a variety of funds here. I would note that second bullet, the tax levy funds, a portion of our property tax is automatically dedicated to debt. So it's in its own fund. It's not a transfer from the general fund over to the debt fund, but it's actually dedicated when you all set the tax levy for debt. And then the other part of it is for operations. So the money that's captured in the debt fund is the portion of the property tax that is captured for debt. And then there's some transfers that do come in from the enterprise funds to pay for their share of the debt. So an enterprise fund, a good example would be wastewater. And so those debts are paid for with the customer account user fees. And so then their debt payment, the money for the debt payment for those projects specifically are then put into this particular fund. So if you look at the details in the budget, you'll see that there's tax money in there directly from the tax levy. You'll see transfers that come from other funds, and then you'll see the expenditures, which is to pay the debt service. Then on the county side, it's similar, but a little bit different list of funds that are available for capital projects. I should note that these are not just for capital projects. This is what pays for all of our operations. So, but like the city side, the county general fund has a portion of that that goes towards dedicated property tax that goes toward debt. And obviously, it has to be used for facilities or capital projects that are categorized as county facilities. So I thought this would just be a good reference sheet for you as to where all the different funding sources come from. On the next slide, the area that we tend to focus on a lot is our general obligation debt portfolio, which is paid for in the general fund through that debt fund I was just talking about. So it's paid for by that portion of that dedicated property tax. And this gives you an illustration of where we are today. So we have about 263 million in outstanding principal. And that doesn't include some authorized but not yet issued debt. So things that have been approved by you all in the past, but the project's not far enough along in order for it to make sense to issue the debt. And I'll talk more about that life cycle here in a minute. But this is actually the debt that we have outstanding. This is our principal. On an annual basis, we spend about 34 million on debt service out of the city budget. And our debt levy, and this is that dedicated portion I was talking about of the property tax, is 17.046 mils per $1,000 assessed value. So you may have heard the county administrator talk about 44% of our property taxes going straight into debt payments. That's what this number represents. It's that 17.046 mils per $1,000 assessed value. On the county side, we have about $13.3 million in outstanding principal. Our annual debt service is 6.3. And then the debt levy is 2.22. So it's substantially lower. And that's mostly because the things that are funded out of the county side of the budget are more service related, less physical, less capital related. And so more of the money is going towards operating type cost or programs as opposed to more construction or capital projects. So how do we decide when it makes sense to issue debt? This is the life cycle that we go through on an annual basis and really even throughout the year. So the capital projects are budgeted. So part of that process is what we're doing tonight, which is to just talk about what is the capital improvement planning process and what's that process we go through. Once the budget's adopted, there'll be projects specifically approved in that process. And so then we work with the departments to figure out how shovel ready is that project. Have we started design? Are we done with design? How ready are we to issue the debt? And from that area, we look at a couple of options. Sometimes we cash finance the design of the project. We have enough money in the funds to do that, or that we issue temporary notes. And we do that for a very specific reason. If a project, for example, is going to cost $100 million, but you're not ready for the 100 million, that's when you start constructing the project and you're going to be paying the contractor. So you're doing the design part of it, which might be $7 million. So we'll do a temporary note. So we're not paying interest on the whole 100 million before we need to, because we don't need that cash quite yet. So we do a temporary note, which allows the project to get going and continue, to proceed. And we time when we do the actual debt issuance to when we're ready to move into construction and we need the actual bond proceeds to then start paying for the major construction. And then through that process, we know the final cost. We have a design, so we know what the engineer's estimate is. We can reassess. Do we have the capacity to do additional projects? Was there a cost savings or the scope changed? And that's when we re-engage in a conversation about that with the commission and the mayor. And then we monitor and adjust really throughout the year because we want to make sure that we're timing that in a way that we're not paying interest before we need to, but also we need to tighten up on getting to where we actually spend down the money from the bonds that we issue in a timely manner. And you may have heard the word arbitrage before. And that's if you don't spend down your bond proceeds within 3 years, you can't make money on money that you borrow. Okay, you can't start earning interest. And so there's a whole calculation you have to go through and return that money back to the bondholders, because that's not what it's intended for. You don't issue debt, pay interest to then just sit on money. You issue debt, you pay interest to do a project. So we're going to tighten up on that because we have had to pay arbitrage and we don't ever want to do that. That doesn't look good for our credit worthiness either. But that timing is really important. So as we're kind of assessing each year, what can we afford to do out of debt? Here's an illustration of a couple of things. There's a couple of things going on in this chart, so it's a little confusing, but on the darker part of the chart, the bar chart, you see the darker part, that's the current debt payments that we have each year. And you'll see that we start getting a gray part to that, which is, and you see the blue part starts going down lower. That's because we're paying off debt. And the gray part is what we're anticipating in order to keep supporting our capital needs that we would reissue. Okay, so it's not exactly flat, but you'll see that it's relatively an attempt to kind of keep that debt, not to keep ratcheting up, but it's trying to keep that debt at a somewhat level basis. The orange line is a line that forecasts that the budget office has put together in terms of the property taxes and how they believe they will increase over time. It's just a forecast, but that kind of shows you the orange line between the orange and the gray bar charts. That's opportunity. Okay, that's opportunity. You could issue more debt, or you can use that money for operations, or you can look at other things to fit into that gap between the two. When it comes to debt issuance, it's not to say that we have to issue the debt at that level. This is just a forecast with the attempt to try and not continue to be so overly reliant on debt, but to better manage that. So we're trying to keep that relatively flat with the known needs that we have now. And that just kind of illustrates for you what we're attempting to do. The next slide is the same illustration, but for the county side of debt service. So you can see there, and really on both of these charts for the next couple of years, there's not a lot retiring off. I mean, it's pretty much, we still have our annual debt payments. But when you look at the gray part, that's where you see, okay, we're going to have some debt coming off. We're going to be retiring some debt over time. And then there's policy decisions that need to be made with regard to the gray part of the bar. If you think of it this way, the blue part of the bar is a commitment we've already made. We have to pay that principal and interest. The gray part of the bar is discretionary, and we've just tried to forecast it at this point based on the long-term needs that have been identified as of now. Those could change. And then the orange is the growth in the property tax in total. So if you kept the same ratio of debt to operating in the property tax, then you would be able to issue more debt, which means to accomplish more capital projects. But again, that's a policy decision because there's no shortage of needs in terms of those limited tax dollars and whether or not you put those into operations or you put them into paying for capital projects with cash. This has been a big priority that the county administrator has raised. We've been issuing debt for maintenance type projects. So pavement maintenance in our parking lots or elevator maintenance is one of them that's on the list. Those are not debt worthy expenses. Those are things that we've got to kind of turn ourselves around and get that off of debt and into operations because it's an annual expense. It's not really a capital project. It is by definition, but it isn't the best funding source. You're paying, it's almost like imagine you needed somebody to come and repair your driveway at your house. So you're going to take out a second mortgage. Well, that doesn't make sense. You know, you need to figure out a way to try to do that in a way that you're not going to be paying on a 30-year note for a pavement repair that's going to last 5 to 7 years. That just doesn't make sense. So we're really starting to take a hard look at that. So the next slide goes along those lines. So the last time we updated at the UG, the debt management policy was in March of 2019. So we're going to get that back out and dust it off and take a look at it and look at the best practices around the country as to what should be our debt management policy. We do want to reduce the reliance on long-term debt. We really want to realign our maintenance type expenses with cash operating money versus our capital expenses. And those are going to be reconstruction of roads, reconstruction of bridges, because they have a life that extends beyond 20 years. And those do make sense to be debt financed. And then we want to also explore trying to realign where we have personnel costs that are currently funded. In some of a good example is the street and highway fund, where we have capital money and we have personnel, and try to realign so that we can segment off some of these funds so that personnel are all over here in the general fund. And then the street and highway fund is all for pay-as-you-go cash basis maintenance projects. That's going to take time. That's not going to be something we can just flip a switch because those are, you know, pretty big swings in dollars, but we're starting to explore what would those options look like? What could we suggest to you all as a strategy to implement something like that? But that would free up actual cash to do those maintenance projects. So we're not issuing debt for that. And then again, looking at how we manage our debt funds, we do a very good job actually in terms of don't issue the long-term debt, issue just the short-term debt until you're ready for construction. I would say probably 90% of the time we do that well. There's a few times that we've sat on money and bond funds that are just sitting there way too long and we need to tighten that up and that'll be a priority. And those bond funds need to be closed out. They're authorized for a specific purpose. When that purpose is accomplished, that bond fund should close out. Any proceeds that are still there then go back to the bondholders. It goes to pay the debt early. And so we need to get into a better process to do that in a more timely manner. And then that will also reduce our arbitrage expense because we will be spending down those funds because we're timing when we issue them. We'll spend them down within that 3-year period. So that's just a high level, where do we find money to do capital projects? And then a little bit on the strategies that we hope to bring forward. We'll do a lot more conversation on the debt management policy with the mayor and the commission so that we can get a better handle on what's the best approach for the long term to be financially sustainable. I'm going to turn it over to, I think Trent is next. He's going to highlight some of the projects for you.
So we'll go over a few of the public works projects you'll see in the budget. We'll start with Rock Island Bridge projects. There's a couple related to that you've seen in the past. So the first one is the access ramp and trail connection. So this one really talks about, there's a parking lot on the west side of the bridge that is under this, as well as the trail connection to the bridge from the parking lot and tied to the levee trail on the west side, as well as the connection on the east side, or the stairs and the ramp connection to that on the east side. That's under that part. So what we've done is broke out the costs over a 3-year period. As Shelley noted, during this period, we'll work with finance and budget to when we actually bond those projects so that we don't debt them all and then sit there for 3 years and not build a project. But one of the complications with all the Rock Island Bridge stuff is the fact that the Corps is currently working on the levee right now. So we're kind of at their mercy and they're changing schedule that they update monthly. So with their contract, we work pretty closely with them. We think we have a current schedule as to when we're going to do stuff, but their schedule could update in a month depending on where their contractor wants to go to work next. So their contractor ultimately has control over anything that goes along on the levee through 2026 or when that's completed. So us working there, being able to work there, they're granting us access to it when they're not there. So it's spread out based on their current schedule. But like I said, we would definitely work with budget and finance if this is approved to not overdraw an account that we're not going to use based on if the Corps is changing schedule. The second project is another RIB, a Rock Island Bridge project. That's on the east side of the bridge, basically. So that includes more of the connection from the parking areas on that side, the KCMO side, connection to the bridge, also to the yards too, which is the apartments that are getting built over there. And then there's a chunk of this that covers the additional, I believe it's 3-acre park that's going to get turned over to the UG. And managed by Parks and Rec, but a chunk of that is to establish the basics of that park, the grading, the utilities that go into it, and prep that site so that parks can take it and expand on it in the future. So those, and if I haven't mentioned it, and we probably know in the past, these projects are contractual obligations of contracts that were done with the Rock Island Bridge. We can go into detail on those. I can't go into detail on those. We get legal to help go into detail on those if we need to, but we're just running through the projects that were contractually obligated by the UG on those. The next one you'll see, it's a new one on there, the Northeast KCK Heritage Trail, which is, we received a grant for $1.2 million to extend the Heritage Trail up 3rd Street, down 3rd Street to the north, roughly or to start to get to Jersey Creek, to connect to the Jersey Creek Trail and what's going through there. We'll take it as far as this grant will get us. We're hoping it gets us all the way down 3rd Street, and then we'll just need to do the connection between the two. So that's a new one that's in there. That'll be a nice project to work on as we move forward. Salt Dome expansion, I think that's an important one we've talked about for a while. We need to improve the size and also the condition of our salt domes so that we can store enough for the winter. We can buy in bulk. When we buy more at a time, when they're cheap, we can store that and keep it safe and not let it get wet so that we can save money in the future and always have that there when we need it for the street department. Next, Reggie. So the big one you see, and we talk about this one all the time, our pavement preservation project. So it's approximately 15 million. This is lumped a few categories together: pavement preservation, concrete repair, which is our curb and gutter that we do at the same time with this, as well as ADA ramps that are required to do when you do any pavement maintenance. So I kind of lumped all those together just to get a big number, but this number reflects another 25% increase. The last 2 years commission has increased that program by 25%. So we just continue to reflect that in here currently. And then 55th and Metropolitan is another grant we received. We received $1.5 million from KDOT to make intersection improvements there, basically adding turn lanes and upgrading the signal system, which is old through that whole intersection. So the remainder of the funds will be just used. We program that in our priority traffic signal budget, so that no additional needs for funding on that other than the grant. And then we'll finish off this one to real quick talk about the bridges we've talked about plenty of times before. So Kansas Avenue, as you know, we submitted the mega grant last year. We did not get that grant. We met with the FHWA and after the grant was submitted and got some information on them, started to improve the grant, help us for an opportunity to submit again. At this point, we haven't received commitment from KCMO that is necessary for them to approve that grant. I believe we're still working on that through that process. So we're updating the grant from our perspective. So if we can get that commit from KCMO, we can move forward with submitting that for a second opportunity. Central Avenue Bridge, we did submit a grant on that one, application for planning and design. We just submitted that first quarter of 24. We haven't heard back on that one yet, so we're waiting on that one. And then we also submitted a grant that covers all our legal bridge structures. We have approximately 80 of those. What that does is planning and design for that to help us better define what we need for a long-term strategy for every one of those major structures we have. We know we talked about in our outcomes of strategy document that we work with commission on is as a bridge goes through its life cycle, having different milestones of once it hits a certain percentage, we need to have a long-term plan for that bridge so we don't end up like we're at with Kansas Avenue and Central Avenue right now. That's all I have. I think it's going, turn it over to Greg next.
Hello, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Greg and executive staff. Excuse me. My name is Greg Wooten. I'm a manager of buildings and logistics. I'm sitting in tonight for John Kelly, the director of our division, and it is our pleasure to share with you the status of some of our high-profile, big-ticketed items. We'll start with the City Hall stabilization. Work continues successfully towards this completion. Long-standing issues of water infiltration are being eliminated and results are already being realized. Project deadline has been pushed out to May of 2025 to address previously unrealized deterioration of the concrete. Project total is estimated to come in at $6.5 million. The next subject we'll talk about is the courthouse rehabilitation project. That will consist of the replacement of roof, HVAC, and electrical systems. This includes supply transformers and is an extensive program. Upgrades will be made to masonry, elevators, which the function of the elevators are completed, interiors are soon to come, fire detection system, plumbing, doors, and windows. That's a long anticipated project ready to launch very soon. Total project cost estimated to be at $14.9 million. New project on the horizon is KCKPD West Patrol. It's a new construction event, and the total project cost with land acquisition is estimated to be approximately $10 million. Of course, it's assumed in the name of it that this is West Patrol and will serve that portion of the community. Next is the KCKPD headquarters chiller system. We're going to replace the current chiller system, and this will include a state-of-the-art command and control system currently being employed throughout the unified government structures as standardized equipment. We've been doing this as of late, and it gives us a great deal of flexibility in command and control offsite, reduces overtime, and gives a lot more flexibility for acute climate control in all areas. The objective of this is to optimize complete area climate control with an improved level of energy consumption. Total project cost estimated to be approximately $1.9 million. Last on the horizon, which is currently under review, fire station number 20. The project cost is estimated to come in at about $13 million for this project. This unit will be located at 72nd and Kansas Avenue, is designed with safety and comfort in mind as our template approach to fire station construction continues. This unit will house 4 fire apparatuses, and personnel will have access to decontamination gear, lockers, EMS storage, kitchen, dining, fitness, and day rooms. This will also, if completed, be the third in a series of stations in the last few years. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. My name is Angel Ferrara, Director for Parks and Recreation. I'll be going over our highlighted requests for this year's capital improvement projects. Our first request is additional funding for a new park out in District 5. As many of you remember, in 2021, we were given $250,000 of seed money for a park. The initial site was intended to be at the new fire station at Hutton and Leavenworth Road. However, after further exploration, it's not a feasible site, has a lot of challenges and many reasons. So we are requesting an additional $500,000 in the amended, and then an additional $500,000 in 2025. We've done some preliminary conceptual design work with the landscape architect, and we have had some preliminary discussions with USD 203 out in Piper on some potential partnerships with some land usage. So we're still exploring those conversations, but The anticipated total project cost is about $1.2 million. And that is if we're able to partner on some land. However, if we're not, we'll have to reevaluate and see about maybe acquiring some land. The second project would be the Rock Island Bridge project. So a request for $500,000 in 2025 to support some initial design work for the infrastructure that will go above ground at this new park that we'll be acquiring. We'll be working really closely internally with Public Works and engineering, and I'm sure a lot of additional internal and external partners as well for that project. Next slide. The third project is a $1 million request in 2025 for upgrades to Azura Amphitheater. So we've been in discussion with New West Management as well as our county administrator on the need to raise the roof at Azura. Azura is more or less a landmark in Kansas. It's seen over 1,000 shows in the last 40 years. The current state of the facility and the stage is about 30 feet tall from the floor of the stage to the top of the roof with the riggings. The artists that they're starting to see are requiring a lot taller of a stage for production. It's also important to note that the rigging system is almost obsolete. It's very old. It's from the 90s. So a lot of improvements need to be made at Azura to stay competitive and to keep the artists coming in. So the request is for 1 million. However, the anticipated total project cost is anywhere between 4 to 4.5 million. New West Management is working actively with the state of Kansas as well as some private funders to come up with the additional funding to be able to fund the improvements to Azura. The fourth project is aquatic facility improvements. So the request for 2025 is 250,000. And this would be to support some immediate deferred maintenance needs at Parkwood Pool and also the community's 3 existing spray parks. We've done some preliminary research with Parkwood Pool and completed an assessment in 2023 that you can expect for our department staff to come before you in the near future, a special session to go over that information. But we are experiencing some challenges as it relates to maintenance at Parkwood Pool and a few of our spray parks that are seeing 20 plus years of life. I do want to say, though, that this is an example. I know often we hear, let's take care of what we have. Parkwood Pool is that example. Considering the age of Parkwood Pool, it's actually been really well maintained. And we want to make sure that we're taking a proactive approach to continue to do that and have those conversations of what we need to be doing to either expand the life of Parkwood Pool or to do some major improvements. So it's good to see that maintenance being maintained at a high level. And the next slate of projects we have is really the department's capital deferred maintenance. So these are our top 5 priority deferred maintenance programs within the department. The first one being the annual shelter repair maintenance program with a continued budget request of $200,000. The department's playground replacement program in the amount of $200,000. Neighborhood park improvements in the amount of $250,000. The department's sidewalk and trail improvements for maintenance for $125,000, and then also community center improvements in the amount of $575,000. And lastly, we have the Sunflower Hills Golf Course clubhouse design. So the golf course is an enterprise fund, so these funds would be requested through the enterprise account. 250,000 in the amended, and then 250,000 in 2025 to support some conceptual design work on the feasibility of an upgraded clubhouse. We did do a clubhouse assessment earlier in 2024 that was completed that has a lot of good data existing and a little bit of information there. That report did identify $305,000 roughly of, wouldn't even really say deferred maintenance, but pretty immediate repairs that would need to be made just to maintain the current usage. I believe that's the last request from Parks and Recreation.
Next core group that we're going to look at is the CIP for technology. So there are some high priority capital requests under technology. So with this particular core group, one of the new approaches they're taking is we used to have where departments put in for their own software applications across the organization. So now we're making all applications across the organization come through this core group so they could be vetted and scoped correctly. One thing we found in the past is that with applications that were getting implemented, we had departments that were kind of running and implementing their own software applications across the organization. They did not talk to all other applications. So with getting technology involved, we were making sure that any applications that we have coming on board are able to talk to each other, or that they have the right software that is needed. Also, that we're moving to more of a cloud-based systems. So making sure that they're also in the cloud, and then also helping protect us from cyber attacks also. So that is one of the things that this particular core group is taking on and taking pretty seriously. And also one of the things that technology is taking it on as far as we have 170 applications across the organization, and they want to monitor the amount of applications that we have in the organization. So that is one thing that they're also keeping an eye on. And once you do get all these applications running, there is a lot of maintenance costs that are associated with it. So as before we were like a unified government, we didn't have as many applications. So as we become unified and going more into the future, we definitely have a lot of maintenance costs as far as with these applications that do have impact on our budget year after year that are recurring costs. So some of the high priority capital requests here in technology are the jail management system. And this is an upgrade for Sheriff's Department. And it is a system that will talk to police department, municipal courts, district courts, and also community corrections. There's an additional $342,000 in the 2025 budget for this. Total project cost is going to be $992,000. And then we also have a broadcast system replacement design. And this is to replace our broadcast system here in this room and also down in the commission chambers. And so this is to study to see what exactly we need and to bring it up to date. The system at this point is going on 11 years old. And then we have fiber connectivity projects across the whole county. And this is $430,000. And this is to get all our traffic network intersections connected fiber wise, and any new construction that we have. We talked about some of the new fire stations. So this is putting fiber where it needs to be run. So we also have a new CSI building and water pollution building. This fiber will be run to. So we kind of like to open it up this presentation for discussion. Some of the next steps in the process are we're going to be working this capital within internally within the organization. We'll be working with the county administrator's office as far as getting capital balanced out. Again, we'll be taking it to the planning commission so they could review capital also. And then we'll continue to build a collective decision-making process as far as that's what we do with departments, as far as getting them to recognize what we have in the capital budget and prioritize what we'll put into it. And then we'll also expand on data-driven capital decisions and getting decisions made by our departments. And Shelley, I know we had talked about moving towards funding a more capital improvement plan with cash and updating management policy, debt management policy. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say additional related to that. All right. So we'd like to open it up and get discussion from you all on capital process.
Thank you, colleagues and the public. I will have to leave after this for some day job stuff, but great presentation. I don't necessarily need an answer now because I don't want to leave and then ask you a question that may take more time. But I did have a question about the Rock Island Bridge, the riverfront park. We had some expenditures that were for Public Works for the park, and then there was cost for UG Parks and Rec for the design. If somebody has a quick bit of like what the difference between those two are, that would kind of help me understand what those two expenditures are and why they can't be combined together.
Yeah, so what we've got right now from a public works side is I hinted at the 3 acres that's all the way to the north side of that. Everything but that chunk has already been, we've got designed, and the majority of it is really a parking lot and connections to the bridge. So sidewalks, grass, basically, and parking lot more or less on the other stuff. The 3 acre chunk that I kind of mentioned, Public Works currently has in this budget to grade that out, get utilities to the site, set it up so that it can come in and Angel and Parks and Rec can design what it needs to look like. Public Works isn't in the business of making stuff, designing parks. It's the infrastructure base side of that portion that gets it prepped, grading, utilities, gets it set up so that it's a blank slate for parks. And then parks side is the design it from there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you all kind of make it to where a park can be possible to be placed there, and then Parks is going to come in and actually design and put the park there.
Correct. It made it efficient for us to do it. We're already out there doing this work on that. So extending it while we're out there grading already, it's a lot cheaper for us to do that now with what we're already doing as opposed to, oh, Angel, you and Parks do everything. Well, then we got another contractor coming back and forth. So that's why we're proposing it that way.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of questions. Dr. Knuven, is it Knuven or Knieven?
It's Knieven.
Knieven, okay, because I knew some Knevens and I.
This
wanted-
is Troy, not Trent. I called him the wrong name. I apologize.
I had, as we were paging through, I kind of tried to jot my couple of questions down on the slides that they pertain to, and one of them is right there. Let me see if that's my first question, if you don't mind. So both on the city and the county side, as we look at the graph that you've given us, the gold bar represents a future revenue projection.
That's right.
The question that comes to my mind is, down at the bottom, it says property tax revenue assumption, but is the gold bar, the gold line, like all revenues that would fund?
That's the property tax. This is just an illustration of the property.
Okay, so what does that bar look like if we adopt a revenue neutral budget on the city or county side, or both?
Okay.
And you don't have to answer tonight.
So there wouldn't be any growth. So the assumptions up there in the corner where it says 2024, 2025, and 2026, 2027. So those are the assumptions for the growth that would happen. So in 2025, we're looking at like a 10% growth, 2026, a 7% growth, and 2027, a 4% growth. So in 2025, we wouldn't have a 10% growth. It would be flat.
would be flat.
Yes.
Your line would be
Okay.
flat.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that. But it's only property tax. So there could be growth in other revenue forms like sales tax collections.
Yes, there could be growth in other forms of revenue projections.
Just wanted to make sure I was understanding that. Thank you. CIP projects, 3 or 4 more slides. Really, I think this is just where I wrote my note. Troy, we had at one time within Public Works online, an active live project map. Is that still in existence, or do we have a person dedicated to keeping that updated?
We have not until a couple weeks ago, Public Works Engineering repositioned one of our old positions to hire someone to do specifically that. However, to get to that point, it takes some work to get to that point now because we've had 2 asset managers turn over, and so it's gotten a little bit behind, but our goal is by the end of the year to have that map up, live, running, and right now that map's kind of all merged together. There's still links still out there. It still works, but it's a bunch of different things. It's kind of confusing right now. So we're actually have a weekly meeting with the asset management team to help start breaking that out and figuring it out so it makes it easier and clearer for the public. But yes, by the end of the year, our goal is to have that map up and running and maintained weekly.
Excellent news. Thank you. Next slide is where I wrote my next question. The bridge grants. At one time, Mayor, I thought like a budget cycle or 2 ago that we had allocated money to reopen 1 lane of Kansas Avenue. Is that still a real project?
Not at that price. So what we've got is the bridge that collapsed in Pittsburgh, I think a couple years ago. That basically happened right after we closed Kansas Avenue Bridge. So once that happened, what they found and when they started looking at that bridge is a lot of issues that the structural engineers didn't really used to look at because individually those issues aren't a problem. Once they all got compounded together, they realized that's what caused that bridge to collapse. As we were going through this process, we were told, we were called by our structural engineers that we work with that look at our bridge, and they're like, hey, I just want to give you an update on this thing. All the issues we see with Kansas Avenue Bridge are what caused the bridge in Pittsburgh to collapse. So that repair got very, very expensive. It's a lot of structural members come out and get removed. We kind of held off on that and working with others because we were hopeful we would get the grant. If that happened, then we move forward. I'm certainly glad to take a deeper look at that if we want to and come up with a true estimate as to what that would cost.
Okay. I mean,
I'd be glad to do that.
we are pursuing the large grants, and I understand we're resubmitting or have resubmitted. Then maybe we don't want to spend. I mean, I guess we have to decide, do we want a lane of that bridge open? And if so, at what cost? And I guess we'll have to decide. But if we're pursuing the large grant for replacement, I mean, ultimately, I would think people, anyway, I just was curious.
Yeah, I'll be glad. I mean, I'd be glad to look into that further and get a better cost for that and come back to standing committee if you want later and we can talk about it if that's what you want to do.
Thank you. I just wanted to know because that's what we had hoped could happen.
Yeah.
Angel, as far as the parks things, I'm really sorry to ask, but you met me out at the lake and we met with the engineer and we looked at the wall. And we know it's expensive, but he also was suggesting that, he could kind of look at all the walls out there to see like what kind of mitigation could be done, not only with the one that has fallen, but, in general, are there things we can do to keep that from happening in other places? And I was just curious, 2 things. Is that ongoing? And then that particular wall, is it in a prior budget or is it in this current budget request, or what's going to happen there? Because one of the other, again, non-engineer me, the other thing he said was almost that you could possibly sort of shave off the hill.
Yeah.
enough that you didn't need a big wall. That's what my non-engineer ears heard. Anyway,
Yeah.
date on that.
Sure. So update on the rock wall. You're right. We did have we consulted with Terracon, some geotech services to go out and actually take a look at the land around there just to make sure that moving forward, working with an engineer, we do build the repair, whatever the wall looks like appropriately. And so we got good information back. It was a natural fail. It wasn't that the earth was moving, so that was great news. Currently, Terracon did provide what they believe to be 3 options for design. So now we are currently working with engineered services with Benish to design a few options for what that could look like. I will say the most cost-effective obviously looks like stamped concrete. However, we do think it is really important to preserve the aesthetics of the lake. And so we are trying to push to have at least 2 options to consider. You know, it kind of really is that one-time cost. If we build it right, hopefully it lasts another 50 years. And so I think it is really important to staff and I think also the community and some members of the commission to maintain that aesthetic. So we are working towards that. We do have money in the budget, and I do believe we put in a request in the amended for just some additional. I don't have that number actually in front of me, but I can get it for you. And then to answer your next question, staff has also considered, and I know we had it as maybe an operating item to maybe set some money aside to do some sort of lake, either restoration plan or master plan so that we can be proactive on some of these areas. We do have some preliminary reports done on some of those other areas. Another area that I will kind of bring up that you might see come before commission in a budget request in the next few years is what I'm kind of referring to as the Marshall Creek Bridge. So that bridge at the front entrance of the lake that crosses Marshall Creek. We have identified that with Mr. Shaw's help and his team, that it's something that we do need to get on our radar and be probably looking at in the near future. So we're starting to do some preliminary work on that as well, but.
Well, good. I think that's mostly good news.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's any sense of a timeline
on the wall.
since we don't know really what other options we're going to look at. I know you said the stamped concrete's the most cost effective, but we might go another way that's more aesthetically pleasing with the surrounding
Yeah.
area of the lake.
So they're actively working and gathering the research to submit a proposal to staff to execute services. So that's kind of where we're at with that process. Once we have that, of course, it's, full steam ahead on trying to develop those design options.
Thank you very much. Next page is Azura, or wherever Azura is. Just curious, it's a county-owned asset, correct?
Correct.
And we're looking at, it looks like maybe a partnership with New West as far as them helping to identify some private dollars.
Yes, correct.
upgrade The actual performance area.
Yeah, so the roof, it needs to be raised about 15 feet. And that's because a lot of the acts now are bringing in larger productions. They're not able to accommodate. They've provided some pro forma on the economic impact that Azura and the concerts do bring to the area. Happy to share that maybe separately if that's of interest, but that is what they would project the project to be, upgrading the rigging system. They've been working preliminary with J.E. Dunn, so they do have some pretty hard numbers of what that project would look like. And then if anyone's interested, and if it was funded, a timeline would be October 1st of 2025. Very aggressive completion date of mid-April of 26 ahead of the World Cup.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, World Cup's coming. In general, I don't know, Mr. Johnson, if this is the time, but is there a notion of like the total CIP dollar amount for 25 yet, or is that, am I a little ahead of that game?
If I recall during our meetings that we have a good idea of the needs. We just need to come up with a recommendation in the face of the rest of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how much do we ask for use of debt? How much are we going to do by cash? And then, of course, the other fund contributions,
Okay, that was,
all that.
next question was, then we'll bring, this is debt, this is cash. Okay,
It's every other budget document that you've had when it came to that we're going to probably modify some of the presentation, but when we identify the project, you'll be easily see how those projects are going to be paid for, what fund and how much. So it's very easy for you to use a communication tool to the public, say that X amount is coming out of debt, cash, other, however that's defined.
very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Commissioner Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. I represent the good people down in Armadale, and I'm asked all the time about the Rock Island Bridge. And could you just tell me the approximate spaces, parking spaces that are going to be available on that side of the bridge?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I can get back to you. I got the plans. I really don't know.
You don't know.
Staff is working on that project. I don't know that number off the top of my head. I can get it for you though.
Okay, thank you. As far as the Central Avenue Bridge, did you say that project was denied?
Central Avenue Bridge, we submitted a request for planning and design first quarter of this year, so we haven't heard back from that one.
You have not heard back. Okay. Are you in contact with them?
Not the agency. No, not, we submit the grant and we're waiting to hear back from it.
Will they just contact you if they're,
They'll contact, yes.
Okay. As far as the courthouse improvements, Greg, you did a nice job. I spent 45 years in that building. I know it. I knew what happened over there. And since consolidation, that building was neglected. I don't care what anybody said. I was there. I saw the neglect that was going on. It was ridiculous. We had jury boxes. We had jurors going in there and water coming down in the jury box at the same time because of the rain. There was a lot of patching going on. Jurors would come up to me and ask me, why does that look like that? Or why does that wall not painted or this and that, So I'm glad that things are going to get done because it's more than necessary. And even the outside of the building, I think needs improvement. That's a limestone building, I think, if I'm not mistaken. We don't want to lose that. That is a gem over there. That building was built in 2 years with no power tools or anything else back there. Horses, everything. So we just can't lose a project like that. I'm glad you're doing the internal improvements this year. It's more than needed. Again, I was in the building all those years. I even had a full hair to blonde hair at the time, and since you did.
Well, we're all reaching a point where the blonde hair is escaping us. I won't speak too much on that, but I will tell you that your concerns have not gone unnoticed by this division. And we've been greatly concerned about that. We love that building. It's an architectural staple of the community. It's coming up on 100 years, as you know, and is in long been anticipated need of these repairs. I will tell you the concept of these repairs dates back to our predecessor's time, and we've been discussing this quite a bit. One thing that we really have been, besides the COVID experience kind of derailing our anticipations, we wanted to be very careful about how we approach that building because there's an overlap and a seaming of all these intricacies that we want to do. We don't want to be like sometimes you get your road done and then 6 months later your road gets tore back up for some other work. When we put in the new air conditioning system, we don't want to drill holes in a brand new roof that we just put in place. So there's a systematic process to integrate all of these rehabilitations at the same time. Now, some can stand alone, but a lot of these really need to work together, in a very seamless, sequenced fashion. On top of that, when you mention masonry, I speak of masonry rehabilitation. Of course, we can't replace the masonry. We have to preserve what's there. And we have identified quite a bit, but there's been a lot of discussion about what do we do for that type of work. We need to preserve it. We've identified certain areas that must be done, and then other aesthetic applications of service that we hope to do. In the end, we're hoping to kind of uplift the facade of that, not just structurally, but aesthetically. So that's going to be something that's yet to be determined, but I can tell you it's part of the equation. And we're happy and excited to do this more than you could probably understand. You know, I've got roots back in that building, as you know, that go way back, you know, many, many decades myself. So I kind of grew up in that environment. I love that building. So we're going to make sure that it gets the treatment that it's long been desired.
Thank you. Also, we need to preserve the golf course facility that it's in dire need of repair as far as putting some type of clubhouse or whatever in there. Other public golf courses have it. You know, you go out there and it's, you know, you don't know if it's going to fall down or not. So I think we really need to make an effort to improve that facility. I think it's necessary because, you know, the golfers they're not going away. They're playing and they're playing. They like that facility. You know, they like the golf course, but, you know, they complain that, you know, once the golf is, they just have to go home. You know, there's nothing to do. So I think it's very important because I think it reflects, you know, on all of us if we don't keep up the facility like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple questions around the aquatic facility improvements. The budget is 250,000 for this year. That's and all of that is at Parkwood, correct?
Not necessarily. You know, we did put in that description to probably try to address some maintenance we've got 3 existing spray parks, and then we anticipate to have the 4th one at Clifton coming online very soon. So
Okay.
it'd probably be between Parkwood and then some of the spray parks.
Okay, and then were you able to acquire any grants for any of that work?
We are working on that currently. We do have a few requests out there, so we are trying to be proactive and getting some grants to help with some of that funding.
Okay, and then the exploring replacement of Parkwood Pool, $6 million. What have you discovered so far in that process?
Yeah, so again, really excited to share the report. There's a lot of good information in there that kind of supports the existing or the data of the existing facility. We've kind of taken just a preliminary look at what it would take to fully replace Parkwood in the existing footprint to kind of get some of those upgrades, meet some of those ADA requirements and some of those other things. And so just a very rough numbers, about 6 million. And however, like I said, we do have data and numbers on what we need to be doing. That's been broken out into 3 categories: immediate needs, basic needs, and then some enhancements, but that is not a full repair, or a full replacement.
Okay, so does that mean you're anticipating gutting the whole system now, the whole swimming pool system, gutting that and then starting from scratch?
If that was the decision to move forward with a full replacement, it would be totally removing the existing basin, the pump room, modernizing that area, utilizing some of the existing locker rooms, but then also trying to incorporate a more ADA friendly access point. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now, just preliminary looking at it.
Okay, and does that also include the showers and the bathrooms and all that as part of the improvement process also included in that estimate 6 million?
It's I don't want to say indefinitely because it's pretty preliminary. That number is more so addressing the actual swimming area and some of the ADA issues. Probably a little bit of the locker room areas, but I think that further discussion and exploration would need to happen just before I can give a true answer. But it is that number is with the intent to fully modernize that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Had I known my colleague was going to ask about that, I would have said, hold her off and let me help her. So one of the comments I want to make is don't get tied to the $6 million yet. And that's why Ms. Farrar was hesitant, and rightfully so. Probably about 2 years ago, there was a commissioning of an evaluation of Parkwood Pool. And it was done in two parts. One, to assess its current needs and condition. And the other would be, what would it take to totally redo Parkwood? Should it still be at Parkwood? The idea, the goal was to have an aquatic center, a term some of you all have heard recently, but this was 2 or 3 years ago. So the administrator is putting that on the schedule. So there will be, look forward to a presentation just on Parkwood. Not only what it takes just to maintain it from year to year, but what would a pool that's been there almost 60 years now should look like? Should it be there? It is not ADA compliant. This came up at about 2016. Can we put slides there? Can we put spray, in the pool? And the short answer was no, because of its age, and it's not ADA compliant. And once you start one thing, you'd have to go down the whole road. So the real inquiry is, what would a new pool look like with a lot more amenities there? But if you've been to Parkwood, it's landlocked in a way. You go north, there's a tremendous slope downward. So don't get hooked onto the 6 million. Presentation to come. So thank you. So we'll start there. And I'd have to commend all the presenters. It's amazing how many times you can hear it, but just the way someone says it this time. With our new CFO, the presentation on debt and the comparison here to the payoff and what we can do, or looking at an opportunity as we pay off debt, but not to turn around and get back into more debt. I know that's where that was going. Mr. Lindsay always makes things crystal clear, as did the other presenters. I'm going to ask Mr. Shaw, who took me to the bridge as some visual so I could see. I appreciated that. And with the Kansas Avenue Bridge, again, I know there was a grant attempted. There'll be a retry, or has been a retry attempted. Do we have any idea of when we may hear back on that?
For the Kansas Avenue one this year, we were not able to resubmit the grant. We updated the stuff from our side.
Mhm.
We never were able to receive the necessary support from Casey Moe. So we had basically two parts of our grant when we submitted it after meeting with the feds, and they went over the grant and saying where we could approve. One of them was from our financial model that we provided them. We updated that with some of their comments. And then the next one, the big chunk was, well, we're not convinced that Casey Moe has full support. They didn't, at that time, we did not have a resolution. Our commission passed a resolution authorizing up to $30 million for a matching share of our portion of it. Casey Moe just provided a letter, basically. And the feds said that's really not enough. So we were working with Casey Moe to try to get commitment, a firm commitment on their side. So if we don't know, for anybody that's out there, that bridge is basically half in Kansas, half in Missouri. The part over the river of the bridge is mostly owned by us, the UG. After that, it goes over Railroad Yard and others, and it's until it ties in, it's owned by Missouri. So or Casey Moe.
Okay, so to make our application look more appealing, those persons or entities that would say yes or no need to see more of a buy-in from Casey.
Yeah, so basically I'm going to butcher this because I don't understand the whole federal process, but talking with the representative, there's a couple stages you got to pass. Like, all right, you do this, you meet the minimum qualifications, you move on to the next set of reviewers. You do this, you move on to the next set. The first set we passed, we had a couple get scores 1 through 3 on different areas. So we passed the first one. Second set they got to. A couple things on my financial thing caused some concern, and part of that was that there was the commitment from KCMO was not firm enough. So without a firmer commitment on the final dollar, the matching dollars,
Mhm.
we wouldn't even made it to step 3 anyway without that commitment.
Thank you. Let's see. Oh, one more question for you. This is slide 22, the Northeast KCK Heritage Trail. Can you identify for me? If not, I think I can go back to Mr. Hand's group, from where to where that trail will extend.
Yeah, it'll on 3rd Street.
Mhm.
It'll connect to the Heritage Trail that kind of comes underneath the bridge and ties in there. And then it'll go up 3rd Street to basically ultimately connect to Jersey Creek. But there's kind of a lot between 3rd Street and I don't know, what's 5th Street, maybe 4th Street. That's open, kind of vacant. I can show you, I can send you a map. It'll be a lot easier than me trying to describe it, but it basically runs down 3rd Street until it gets to that. It'll ultimately tie into Jersey Creek and the trails that are in Jersey Creek Park.
So the estimated cost will really be used to do what with regard to the trail? This is infrastructure, these are sign, what exactly?
Oh, it'll be to build a sidewalk, basically, a trail.
Okay.
So it'll be a concrete trail.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. I have a few questions. First, I just want to say I really like the debt management strategy aspect. That is extremely important. We reduce our debt and it improves our overall financial rating and allows us to really be more prudent with tax dollars if we see the cash going out versus having a bond setting out here that we don't see an end to until it comes online. So I do like that strategy. Will someone be coming forward with a policy recommendation in reference on how we can do that? So I would assume that would be coming forward. Wonderful. I didn't know if you would need input from us on that, or if you would be giving us a blueprint as to what we need to examine. The next thing is the Wyandotte County funding sources and the city funding sources. There are some in there that I believe, if I remember correctly, a couple of budgets, we've been supplementing funds to some of those sources because they didn't meet their fiduciary commitment that we had put in as a budget. And so we had to supplement them and go back and pick them up. And if I remember, I think one of them might have been emergency medical services. We were supplementing it by about, if I want to say, 900,000 a year. And if that's the case, we may want to look at how we do that. That's just one of them that comes forward. And I know the stadium, we bumped up the price of the tickets, I believe, to deal with the parking issue that we found ourselves underwater with on that one. The special revenue funds on the county side, the aging, elections, developmental disability, we went in and looked at those the mill levies that we had associated to those to make sure that they were providing enough money to provide the services necessary, because we had large amounts of reserves in those accounts. And when you have that much reserve, it kind of makes me wonder what services we're not providing, or if the mill levy needs to be adjusted. And if we can lower those mills or move them around to ensure that we're not having to supplement anything else, that would help us free up additional money within the budget to work forward. So I really like that aspect. And those are 11 funds I've kind of been watching ever since I've been here. But the temporary notes and flexibility, I really like that, reducing debt capacity review. The other one I wanted to talk about, and bear with me, I'm running through all of this real quick. Realign the personnel to fund capital projects. And Mr. Administrator, I don't need an answer today. I'm just really pleased to see us put the personnel into general fund budget versus having a special fund out there to pay for payroll. I really think that's a more transparent, more concise way in which to budget for personnel. So I really do appreciate seeing that in there. The one other item that I wanted to talk about was the 55th and Metropolitan. If I heard you correctly, Troy, you said that was KDOT money? Yes. That, is it 55th and Met or
55th.
55th and Met?
Metropolitan, it's an intersection safety grant that we received money from KDOT. So yeah, I think it was $1.5 million from KDOT. And it'll basically replace all the old signals that are out there, upgrade all the cabinets and everything, as well as add turn lanes in all 4 corners.
Yeah, that's great. That's a school safety issue, walkability between the three schools that are right through that entire neighborhood. So I'm glad to see KDOT stepped up to that one. The City Hall stabilization budget. We talked about this when we passed the downtown revitalization policy. It was is it the landmarks? You might have to help me with this one. Was it landmarks or the historical designation of downtown? Had we held off starting the renovation of the City Hall, we would have fallen under that category, and 40% of it would have been reimbursed through because we were within that designated historical district. Am I correct? I think we heard that from Grimes and Gunner. But anyway, I'll follow up with that one myself to find out if that's accurate. But if there was a way, if that total project $6.5 million, if we could be reimbursed 40% of that, that's a tremendous savings. I just don't know if we'd have to stop and restart with a different proposal. I don't know how we could qualify. But if I remember correctly, they said if we waited a few more months, we would have been within that process to do that. And I think that was waiting for state approval for us to utilize local approval for that designation for downtown. The last one is I'm really pleased to see that my colleague, Mr. Burns, and I know Commissioner Stites has talked about the golf course clubhouse. It's just a matter of time we're going to have an issue out there. It is really bad shape. And it's a facility that I believe if it was modernized and replaced, that it would pay for itself in a matter of probably 5 to 10 years because of the growth in the golf game out there, the condition of the course, the amount of people that are out there. If the clubhouse was designed in a certain way, there would be a lot better usage and rental capability of that facility out there. It's underutilized now because of the condition it's in, and I'm not so sure we couldn't raise the rates to go right along with the new clubhouse. So I'm pleased to see, and thank you for mentioning that. The last one is the fiber connectivity project. That is the one between all of the buildings. There was a group of us that met here a while back with the state fiber optic group to see what we can do about creating I don't want to call it like a star bonds, but a certificated area that we would be able to utilize state and federal funds to do just this project right here. And I know that we will probably reconvene again with the state's guidance, but if that is a project that needs to be done, I believe we can have some financial assistance with that and maybe even be able to grow that project further out than just our government buildings. So, but other than that, I look forward to doing whatever I can to help. And I do sincerely appreciate the thoroughness of the presentation this evening. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't recall which slide this was on, but with regard to the connectivity, I saw that the fire station in Fairfax. What, if anything, essential that needs to be done is not being done because the lack of the fiber optics connectivity that we're talking about? That's not impacting any essential service, but Can somebody explain to me what is not maybe being done?
One of the things that happening down there as far as they're updating the fiber connectivity there. So there's already some connectivity there. So they're updating it and bringing it up to speed where there's more broadband width.
And what would that really allow? More-
So one of the things with like with fire stations, they do have like where 911 runs like calls through there as far as like getting the data from calls that are run through there. So
Okay.
that's how that fire station is helped out. And then just everything down in the Fairfax area, it will improve like the fiber connectivity there, and it's an old part of town, so it's improving it there.
So do we have like, it would decrease like dead spots, better reception, those types of things?
It's more so like the like internet delivery going to those buildings.
Thank you.
Okay. I had some questions. And I know I've been gone and thank you. This is a good presentation. Just looking, I know I've missed some of that. I know you all are going to meet with later and bring me up to speed on what I've missed as far as the presentations up to this point. But I guess this is for both commission and staff. When we talk about those slides, and it's an awesome laundry list of asks from this commission and ultimately from our taxpayers. The biggest thing that comes to mind is, and I get that everything could be defined as something that's needed, but are we positioning our commission to prioritize what is essential, that word that Commissioner Townsend just used? What are wants and what are actual needs? What are critical needs today and needs that can be put off tomorrow? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I know the last budget slide I observed from finance was that come 26, 28, whenever, around that time, we're in the red, both in the county and the city budget. Is that still the case?
No, that is not the case. I mean, out to 2028, we're definitely on the city and the county side. When we started the budget season last season, we were in the red, but when we got through the budget season last year, we had removed the deficit as far as being in the red. But there is still some work we need to do to be as far as being structurally balanced, and that is something we'll be working towards. But as far as having fund balance that is recommended by GFOA and our rating agencies, that is something that we did achieve.
So there's a new map that doesn't show us being in the red in 26, 27, 28.
Yes, and that was something like when we got to the end of last year's budget season that we had improved to.
Yeah, I know that. I still have those slides. I just remember everything. But that's predicated on tax increases, correct?
So I mean, looking into like where we ended for 2024, like going in from 2023 to 2024, like what we're forecasting, how we end this year is not based on like property tax increases, just like what we built into the budget last year. But like looking out into the future to the 28 and 2029 budget, we do have like growing modestly property tax wise.
Well, if you pull that slide back up, I mean, there's one of the slides that actually showed a line of property tax going up. I'm just going off what you all are showing me, and I'm going off the slides that have been presented in the past. I haven't seen anything new. It's unfortunate that if that's changed, that I haven't been brought up to speed on that, because the last information I received is that we will be in the red 26, 28, unless there are substantial property taxes increases to bridge that deficit that's projected. I mean, that's what I see. And I don't know what anybody else sees. So where I'm going with this is, I know there's a lot of wants, and they're great. I want all these things for our community, but I also want to make sure that we're taking into account The thing I hear everywhere I go in this community, and I don't want that to be lost on anybody in this room, is that our residents, because that's what matters to me most, and that's who put me here. They want substantial tax relief in both property taxes and the BPU pilot. And to get there, it's fine, but I'm hearing all these things. And there was a good question that came up. I'll just, not picking on parks, but I'll just use that example. There's there a theater. I know that there's $1 million and I think of 4,500 million or 40.5 million or something to bring it up to speed. But have we looked at a return on that investment and a cost to benefit analysis to see that if we spend that type of money, are we going to get the type of entertainment venues to get a return on that investment? I haven't seen that. And if we're not, and there's no guarantees of that, of bookings that are going to return investments that are spent on that, why would we spend it? And where I'm going with that also is this commission needs to prioritize, again, what are the wants and what are the needs? What are essential services and what can we live without? And what do we absolutely need today and tomorrow? And also, I haven't heard anything about streamlining. I haven't heard about cutting. I haven't heard about efficiencies. And I really haven't had a strong conversation about how do we talk about getting tax relief to our residents, as well as BPU pilot relief. Those are the biggest things that I hear the residents saying they want. And their voice resonates more to me than anybody else's in this room, because that's who we're supposed to be working for. And so I just ask respectfully, is that we take the time to at least have a conversation about that. How do we broaden that tax base? I can tell you, we've all heard it. We've got to bring in people to anchor themselves in Wyandotte County. But to do that, we have to provide the goods and services, the resources and amenities that are going to draw people here to make it favorable to want to live here, while also reducing the tax burden and the BPU burden that's going to keep people here. And those are the types of things that I'm hearing. But then we also have to look at our policies. If we're going to broaden that tax base and we look at developers, we get a lot of complaint about how hard it is to do business here in Wyandotte County with our current process. So we've got to look at streamlining that process and cutting out the flack and the bureaucracy, so people that want to do business here and pay property taxes that could expand our tax base and pay for all these great and wonderful things that I know we would all love to see here, we can get the tax base to be able to do that. What I see on this screen is I see revenues, future, and then I see debt, which is great, but I don't see anything about how we expand our tax base to improve that dynamic so we don't have to depend solely on property taxes, somewhat on sales taxes, and the pilot to be able to accomplish a lot of these things that we know are necessary, at least some of them. But I'd really like to see things divide up in a way to where, and really we get feedback from the community best we can. And I know Ashley Hannah's done a real good job with Dot Talks, trying to get out and get that information, but really bridging that information to your department to kind of see what the priorities really should be, as opposed to what we may want as far as our pet projects. And I'm not saying they're all pet projects, but better align the wants with the needs that reflect the values of our community. And so that's what I ask as we move forward. I heard Commissioner Bynum talk about revenue neutral. Yeah, I believe I missed that presentation. I don't know what that would look like. And I'm not even saying I'm advocating for revenue neutral, but what I am advocating for is that how can we provide tax relief in a way that allows this government to hit the basic essential service for us to function and run a government that meets the reasonable expectations that our residents have for us. And I know we want a lot of different things, but I think where we're at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Administrator, and if these maps or slides have changed to show that we're not in the red anymore, moving forward, then we need to market that to our residents a little better and say, hey, all is great. You don't have to worry about going in the red no more. We fixed it. You know, You don't have to worry about your taxes going up, those types of things, if that's the case. But I think we need to be transparent. We need to make it absolutely clear of where we're going with our budget. Because when I talk to folks and I go back off the last information I had, it says we're in the red. Now I'm being told we're not. I don't see anything that says any different. But I think if that's the case, I know there's a lot of inquiring minds in our community that are really concerned about making it from day to day, paying their bills. And I've had people show me their tax bills. And they've used a lot of colorful language with me and they're not happy. And they said they had enough. And I don't know if you all been paying to houses going up for sale around here, but I'm starting to pay attention. And I've got people telling me that if this unified government doesn't change course, they're not only going to pay the taxes, they're going to move out of here. Because they just want to see a return on their investment of those tax dollars. And so I challenge this commission, I challenge staff to look at all these wants and asks and identify, number one, what are our essential services? And then what are the things that we actually need to function as a municipality to provide basic essential services to our residents? And then build off that and make sure that it fits a model that is more community driven as opposed to anything else. And so, but thank you. I think that information, but I'd love to see those new slides if you all have them that really show that we're not in the red anymore, because that's information I want to show not only to the people I talk to, but I'd like to share with the media and the public to show that we have dug ourselves out somehow within a year. So thank you.
Also, Mayor, I will share with you that we are in the middle of a process called priority-based budgeting that we did reintroduce. And some of our biggest priorities within priority-based budgeting is to be able to shift like expenses so that we can have pilot relief and also property tax relief. So that is definitely something that we are in the process of working.
I guess to our staff, the mayor asked a fundamental question because while we started this budget process while he was in rehabilitation, physical rehabilitation, you want to make sure that's stated. And so if Reggie, can you make a point to contact his office and show him those other slides that we used in the early budget years? However, when we finished last year's budget process and we had finished the debate of revenue neutral to where the commission adopted the budget that took advantage of all the valuation, the new budget model that was shown to you last year showed what I promised is we were pushing out the challenge years out past the 26 years. It then kind of looked like it might have been around 33 in our minds. But I think that 1 year really, and then we changed our assumptions where we were hearing about property tax relief. We were talking about the demand for BPU reduction. We went through an exercise with the commission on commission discretionary funding that was around 22 million. And at the time, because of lack of dialogue, you couldn't make an informed decision on that. So there is and has been discussion about the very things you identified, Mayor. Getting back to the basics, getting back to what we can afford, and continually informing the public of the challenges that we face in services that they are actually demanding as well. Any demand that for services always has a price tag attached to it. So it's all this idea of providing balance of what are the basic services that government has to provide. The priority-based budgeting model that we talked about is being driven a lot by what we talked about in the last budget process. What can we do? What must we do by federal, state law? What then contractual obligations we have that then can be maybe modified, or are they mandatory for a number of years? And then there's the discretionary spending. So we're continuing down this process in the next few weeks. But Reggie, maybe Shelley as well, meet with the mayor to review the previous work that had been presented to the commission in previous budget sessions that he could not attend.
And thank you. I'll close with this. And I've said it before, I just think the model that I've seen over the years of tax spend, borrow, deplete the reserve funds and raise taxes hasn't worked good, not just for this organization, but it's really been a detriment to our hardworking families, especially our seniors on fixed incomes, and those that are just trying to make it from day to day, and those that want to live here and want to see a return on their investment as far as if you're going to pay that type of money to this unified government. Because I get a lot of complaints on, especially east of 78th Street, 55th Street, it gets worse, parts of pockets of 635, the blight, the trash. I mean, it's just the urban decay. And I know we've got plans to work on those types of things, but I just think that really, we really need to take our hard look at not just at who we are, but who we should be as an organization, and really factor in and put the community, our residents, and what they want as priority one. And what they want as priority one is, I need tax relief. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to get us there. You all the professionals, we pay you well. But I think that if that's the number one and number two issues of BPU and property tax relief for our residents, while also maintaining our essential services, I think we ought to make that a number one priority and look at some of these things and say, okay, I know we want a lot of stuff, but let's kind of scale that, kind of like what Troy talked about with the bridge. When they look at our grants, they rate us number one and number two. Okay, we can't have everything, but I believe we can have the essential things to make this place a livable community for our residents, while also providing the relief that they've come to demand. Another big thing, and since I've been there, I've asked, and I really haven't got a handle on it, and I don't know how long it would take staff to get this, but I've had people ask me. We get a lot of generalizations when we look at the numbers, a lot of general numbers, but the biggest number and I should say the financial picture that people would want to see is, where is every penny of every tax dollar going? I don't know what that looks like. I've asked for it. I can tell you, when I worked on the police department and I was given my budget, I could tell you that. I could tell you down to the penny what I spent for my budget and where that went. And I did that because I didn't want anybody to say, you misuse government funds and all that crap. And I was really responsible and intentional about that. And so there's a lot of questions that come up, especially when we go back a year and a half ago and we look at the P-card situation, where $23 million just kind of evaporated. And to this day, nobody can account for it. I get questions about ARPA funds, and I know Commissioner Bynum, and it's coming up, and Commissioner Burrows brought that up, I think, initially as well, as we need to take a hard look at these ARPA funds. Where have they been spent? What does our audit look like? Because I can tell you, between the Trump administration and the Biden administration due to COVID, probably almost $100 million. And I had some residents tell me they don't see $100 million of nothing around here as far as investment, on top of the property taxes and the other things that increases that they've seen. And so I just think we just need to take a hard look at some of these things. And I'm not saying this as the mayor just because I want to say them. I'm relaying to you all what people in this community are telling me, because that's my job. And I'm just requesting and advocating and urging staff and commission to let's start, number one, prioritizing. But the top priority should always be, what is the main issues for our residents? And then we start from there. So thank you very much. This is the end of the business for today. Thank you all for the presentation. There is no further business. I'll make a motion to adjourn. There's a motion. Second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Kane? Hope Stites?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
Burns,
Aye.
Hill,
Bye.
motion carries.
Thank you. Everybody have a good evening.